Okay, today's going to be a great day because I'm going to be rebuilding an overdrive section for the 4+3 overdrive transmission. A lot of people have been asking me to do a video on this. It's been a long time since I've actually built one of these transmissions. I used to do them for General Motors back in the 80s actually. We had a deal with GM dealerships nationwide to rebuild them, and I came across a lot of problems with those transmissions and developed a lot of fixes for them, and thus I got a contract with GM to rebuild them. So I know a lot about them. Anyway, the 4+3 overdrive transmission was used in 1984 to 1988 Corvettes. It was basically a Super T10 4-speed with an overdrive section bolted to the back of it. Now the overdrive section is like an automatic transmission. It's almost like a little power glide. It's got a planetary setup inside of it, a set of clutches applied by use of your computer, and when that application happens, the clutches compress, hold the planetary in place, and the planetary steps up and creates an overdrive ratio for the transmission. The reason why they decided to go through this crazy transmission instead of a 5-speed or a 6-speed that we have today is because there really were no 5-speed or 6-speeds available at the time to handle the type of torque and power those cars are putting out. And that is actually one of the reasons why there was never an 83 Corvette. In 1983, I think there were about 50 or 60 prototypes built, but they didn't have a manual transmission. And the reason why GM was hesitant to release the car in 83 was because there was a thing back then, I think it's still in existence today, called the gas guzzler tax. And they didn't want to have a gas guzzler tax added to these cars because they did not meet certain mile per gallon requirements to get under the tax where you didn't have to pay it. So an overdrive was important, and they hired Doug Nash Corporation, who had the rights at that time to build the Super T10, to design an overdrive system for the Corvette. And that's what you ended up with. I was involved in it from the beginning, so I saw a lot of the prototype transmissions and a lot of the problems that happened. Most of the time these transmissions failed under 50,000 miles, especially in the early 84 to 85 cars. And as a result, there was a lot of service bulletins and issues with those, but there was never a recall, which is interesting because they should have really had a recall for those. So that's it. I'm going to show you how to rebuild this transmission. It's probably going to be about a 2-part video. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop by my friend's shop in Jupiter, a Corvette shop called Eisman's Corvette, because I believe they have an 84 Corvette over there. And I'm going to show you the interior and how that's all set up. Let's get to that. So this is an 84 Corvette with the Crossfire fuel injection, oldie but goodie. So here's a 4-speed setup. This shifter assembly is actually bolted to the floor of the car, not to the transmission. And on the 84s, you have the overdrive switch on the console. Actually went for 84 to some early 85 cars. Later on, the switch was put on the button. It's important to note that on the 84 and 85 cars, it's basically a simple switch, on and off. That's what it does. On the later 85 cars, it's a momentary switch. You press it, gives a pulse to the computer, and it sends it on and off. So it's important to understand that the switch is not a direct link to the overdrive system. It's basically a request to the computer that you want overdrive. And the computer looks at engine temperature, speed, and so forth, and then gives you overdrive if all those parameters are met. Hey Ron, are you here? Did you bench that?
Yeah, I needed the room and I was afraid you'd pull something.
You know, it's really not 5 o'clock anywhere.
Why don't you drink your soy, chai, whatever the f*** it is, and leave me alone?
And so begins another day. And she spilled beer on my bench.
before I get into taking apart this overdrive unit, I wanted to show you a few little tips of mine to look at on the outside of the unit, because sometimes you may get this overdrive out of the car and you could just tell some telltale signs that it's fried and not even bother getting into it, because if they're really bad, they're going to be very costly, and it's worth just getting a remanufactured unit. The other thing is that if you're going and buying a unit at a swap meet, it's possible that by looking at these little telltale signs of something gone bad, that you can just pass on it before you buy it and get smoked and trying to buy a unit that's non-rebuildable. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, this is the front seal of the overdrive unit. It seals the sun gear or input shaft of the transmission to the front plate. And if you notice, the seal has a recess in it. In other words, there's about 1/8 of an inch recess in the seal in relationship to the front of the plate. It never presses to the front over here. It's always recessed down a bit. So a lot of times you'll see that the seal starts protruding and bulging outward. Sometimes you might even see it actually come out of the unit. And the reason that is because the bearing that this sun gear rides on has come out and moved forward and popped the seal out. So if you start looking at overdrive systems and the seal is actually sticking out of the unit, that means that the sun gear bearing is going bad, or the carrier that holds the bearing is going bad. The other thing is sometimes I've actually seen these seals completely pop out, and then the transmission, because the reverse gear is right here, will not be able to come back out of reverse. So you always want to look for a seal that's actually recessed like this. Secondly is this outer perimeter of the plate. Notice that this is nicely clean, it's shiny. Now, if the carrier bearing goes bad, what will happen is the carrier will then walk forward and hit the front plate. And a lot of times this whole area will start looking overheated. It'll actually turn charcoal gray and actually brown. And when you see this whole area burnt and heated, you'll see this heat kind of start in the middle and radiate out this way. That means that the carrier has actually contacted the front plate. And when that usually happens, that means the carrier is destroyed, the front plate is destroyed, and usually the overdrive piston, which is sandwiched in between them, is also ruined. Next thing you want to test is for a good carrier bearing. So if you got a unit and it's on the ground, if you can carry one of these yokes around, because it's not going to be able to turn easily by hand. There's a lot of drag in this unit. You put a yoke in the back of it, it'll spin with some drag, but it'll spin smooth. It will not spin notchy and jagged. In other words, it shouldn't be spinning like this, like where it's hard to spin or you can feel marbles inside. It should spin nice and smooth. And the other thing is, if the carrier bearing is shot, you're going to get a severe amount of end play in the unit. So you can put your finger in the front of the sun gear like this, and your palm on the back, and move it back and forth. A normal unit has about 3/1000 clearance or some preload to it. So you want to make sure that there's some preload, very little, and a little tiny movement perhaps. But if it's got a lot of movement back and forth, that means something's gone bad inside the transmission. So this is an easy way to just see a few things. Let's get taking this unit apart. Okay, this is a very important step in taking this overdrive apart properly. First thing you want to do is take out these 3 pipe plugs. They're in the back. They're 1/8 inch pipe plugs, and they have a 3/16 hex on them. Now most of the time these plugs are going to strip out unless you heat them up, shock them, and then use a good socket on them. If in the event that you strip it out, you could use a Torx bit, bang it in there and broach it, and it'll come loose. So let's see how this works. We're going to heat these up first, and then we're going to remove the plugs. Nice. I discard these plugs and put some nice hard plugs in there, hardened steel plugs later on. I really lucked out. Usually these strip out. Yeah, finally. The reason why we take these 3 plugs out is because we need to secure the direct clutch piston in place. It's on a 1,300 pounds load, and we can't have it fly out of the transmission. So what we need to do is we need to secure it in place. And what you do is you take these bolts that I had made up, they're 8mm, 16mm long, you put them in here, and you catch the piston. All right, and you're going to turn it all the way till it stops turning. That means it's bottomed out against the steel that's in front of the piston. You don't want to force it in there. You just want to get it in until it stops, okay? And you want to put all 3 of them in there. This is a very important part of this process. Again, these are 16mm long, fully threaded bolts.
And you have to turn it so that it's actually fully engaging all the threads on the piston internally. There we go. Then what we're going to do is, with these nuts now, we're going to just turn them back. You're going to make the nuts fully contact, okay, the case. So here you can see we have 3 of these 8mm by 60mm long bolts. They're screwed into the piston inside. And we just take these nuts here and we just snug them a little bit against the case so that the piston is secured. That's all we need to do. 3 places. Now we'll work on taking these 4 flathead cap screws out. Same way. These are 5mm hex stuff. You use the 3/16 on them, you're going to strip them. That's another mistake people make. US threads in the back, metric threads in the front. So these are 5mm hex on these, and we're going to heat these up, shock them, and try to get them loose without them stripping. Let me remove the reverse idler, thrust washer, and race here. Don't want to lose these. There's a silicone sealer underneath these because there's no gasket under there's a seal, but this is held in place with silicone. Gonna use the big sledge for this. Now, sometimes doing this with the punch, it'll also close up the hex slot a little bit. Let's see what we got. That's good. There's one loose. 2. Oh, we're so lucky on this unit, let me tell you. That's beautiful. Now the reason why we secure this piston is because there's a little notice over here that says warning. This plate may be under load. Do not remove without the proper restraining device. Proper restraining device is those 3 bolts. So now that I have the 4 bolts removed, I could take this cover off. And usually I just pry a little bit on the end over here. It's sticking up a little bit, so it's not really against the case. You could just tap it. And you want to be very careful because you don't want the carrier bearing to come out within the cover and fall apart. That's another thing. This is an angular contact bearing behind this, and if you pull it the wrong way, the bearing can actually come apart. So you have to be very careful. I'm just gradually taking the plate like this and taking it out very carefully. I don't want the carrier bearing to come out with the plate. And you see here, this is the carrier bearing I was talking about, and inside was the sun gear bearing over here that hits the case. So now what I'm going to do is take the piston out. There's just a simple snap ring in here that holds the piston in place. And again, the reason why we want to keep that other piston restrained is because otherwise this whole thing, if I were to remove this snap ring, would come flying out at me on the 1,300 pounds load. Okay. Now this piston serves 2 purposes, but it's actually an overdrive piston and an accumulator combined. Here's your piston. So this is your overdrive planetary, and you have 4 13mm bolts that hold the planetary together to the back plate. But you don't have to take these bolts out. You can pull the whole planetary apart. But when you put it back together again, you're going to have to actually put it together in pieces. So you can pull it apart right now in one piece, which is a good idea because I can show you how to mark the gears because these have to be timed. So you could just simply pull this out. What's going to come out with it is all the clutches because the whole forward drum is in here. Okay? See, it's just like this. Now notice the unique thing about this planetary, that's a 2-stage planetary. So these gears actually have to be timed within each other. Very simple. This is actually your overdrive piston. It's a nice shape. Usually sometimes these wear or break on the ends. It's a very good shape, this piston. This is your overdrive clutch stack. These are the remaining clutches and steels for the direct. I'm going to put these in the drum for now. This is your thrust washer for the sun gear. There's a sprag in here. It's actually an early 700 sprag. And this is your direct clutch thrust washer and bearing. And these are a new design washer that I actually came up with for GM. It has legs that are cut out so it doesn't spin. Earlier washers, these are solid one piece, and the washer used to spin in the case and get caught within the grooves of the case inside over here, and then break and hang up in two modes. Next is to remove the output shaft and pump assembly. This particular transmission is a little unique because this whole output shaft actually drives the pump. And so the car actually has to be moving to develop line pressure. There's these little slots over here that get at the 4 cap screws that actually have 5mm heads on them. And you want to shock them loose. It's 1, 2. It doesn't take much on these. They'll usually be pretty loose once you do this. But you don't want to strip them because it's really going to be very difficult to get at them if you do. So it's best to always shock them first. If you have a long 5mm socket, that works good, but usually one of these will work fine. And just get in and break it loose. Do one at a time. So take all 4 off. And the best thing to do is use a magnet to pull them out once they're loose. So there are going to be 4 of these cap screws like this that are going to come out. It's 2. 3. So there's a couple of safety devices in this, by the way, to keep it from burning up. So you have to develop full line pressure before you go in to get overdrive. So there's a pressure switch in the valve body that prevents that from happening. So this is your output shaft and pump assembly. It's actually got a sprag in it. You can see the sprag actually broke. There's a piece missing from it over here. One of the elements is gone. This is an early 700 sprag, so it's actually pretty easy to find. We'll put this aside right now. So as you can see, the 3 bolts that I put in from the outside are retaining this pressure plate in place. There's about a 1,300 pound load on this. There's springs behind it. These bolts are merely to keep the plate in place. You never want to pull the plate down with these bolts. You'll probably end up breaking the plate. So what we're going to do now is take the pan off and take the valve body out and then take the plate out. So we're going to take this pan off. It's got 12 10mm head bolts on it. The pan has no gasket, just silicone sealer, but I got a feeling somebody might have been in this before and removed this pan. Maybe not. These also have a tendency to strip quite easily. These are 6mm thread in the event This is a 6mm thread. They have a tendency to strip really easy, so you want to be very careful when you retighten this. I actually have gaskets for these, so we don't use this RTV sealant that much anymore. As you can see, they just have a magnet that's in the pan. What I usually do is I'll clean the magnet off, of course, but I'll also install a magnetic fill plug in here. This will be able to have a little bit extra protection. The filter's been removed on this. There's no filter here. I don't know why that is, but maybe somebody was in this before. So let's take a second to look at this. What you got here is your input to the overdrive unit, single spade terminal. Wire wraps around, goes underneath the valve body, goes to a pressure switch. So remember I was telling you that it's a rear pump. So once the vehicle's up to operating speed and the line pressure is correct, the switch will close. It'll send power to the solenoid, which has a little ball inside there, which closes off a passage and sends pressure to the overdrive piston, and you get overdrive. So you've got 2 5mm socket head cap screws, and the rest are all 10mm bolts. And you can pry off these electrical connectors, move them out of the way. You can keep this on here. It's going to come off with the valve body. You just want to take out the single lead. What we're going to do is break this loose. Now there are going to be 2 check balls. There's going to be a check ball on the outside of the valve body under this spring over here, and it's going to be check ball. There's a plate
in between the valve body and the case, and there's going to be a check ball on the other side of that. You don't want to lose those check balls. Some of these bolt sizes are very critical because they go inside to the main case. Before I remove this valve body, this little piece here, if you notice, has some serrations on it. It really doesn't matter on this particular unit, but on the older systems, you can see that there's this threaded boss over here. On the older systems that had a throttle valve cable, it kind of came against this as a stop, and you adjusted the stop for the throttle valve cable lever that was in here. This one doesn't have it. I recommend to actually remove them and switch over to later valve bodies if you have one with a throttle valve cable on it. Okay, so this is going to come off now, and we're going to have a ball that's going to come out over here. So here we have this one ball here, and normally this doesn't have the passageway for it, but normally there would be another ball over here on the 84 or 85. So I don't think they don't have the ball in this one, but normally there's another ball in this chamber if you have the early unit. This one doesn't have that. Now I always change these connectors because they get loose. Move the wire. We got this whole thing disassembled. This is your cooler block, what I call it. This goes to the cooler in the radiator, and there's a simple bypass valve in this particular cooler so the unit doesn't overheat in the event that something gets clogged. I usually take them apart and clean out the valves if I can and put them back together again. Check them to see if they've got any dirt in them. You can leave them in. Most of the time they're okay, but I like to take the cooler block off. I usually will try to just take the cooler block off this way and not have to loosen the line, because sometimes these lines can leak, and the lines look pretty good. So what I'll usually do is just crack this loose over here and take these two bolts out and remove the block. Alright, so I got a set of flare wrenches, a 5/8 and a 3/4. I'm going to put this on here and crack this loose. It's pretty good. These are 10mm bolts. Sometimes the washers are stuck to the aluminum block. Be careful you don't lose them, okay? So what we're going to do is just take this off like this, okay? We're going to leave this in place and not touch this fitting here. That's all it is. Inside of this is going to be a little check valve, basically, for bypassing the oil in the cooler. Okay, I'm going to walk over to the press right now. I got the unit set up in the press. So as you can see here, I've got that round disc that I had in the beginning of the video attached to the press. It's held in place right now. And what we're going to do is put some pressure on this. And we just want to take enough pressure off the plate to loosen those bolts. Take the bolts out and then release the plate from the unit. Underneath this plate is going to be a bunch of dual coil springs. So I just got to put a little pressure on it, push the plate down, and feel if I can loosen those bolts. I can feel the plate moving. That's good. Got the remaining two out. Now the pressure plate is released and it's floating in here on the springs, but I'm going to take it to the bench before I take all these springs out of here. There's quite a bit of springs inside of this. Before we take this pressure plate out, I want you to notice that this plate actually has an orientation. You see these little cutouts over here? These face the bottom. So this is the bottom of the plate. Make sure it goes together in that same fashion, that you don't flip it around. These are areas for the plate to actually exhaust oil. But for some reason they have these little areas that spread out a bit. Don't know what they're for, but we want to leave them in the same place.
plate comes out. See, you have a nice clean shot of what the pressure plate springs look like. Now, the only thing I don't like about this particular setup is that this particular spring should really be over here. You want to have a nice balance of spring pressure every 120 degrees. That's one thing. The next tip I can tell you is look at the springs. These springs are in nice shape. They have good space in between the coils. A lot of times when these units overheat and they burn up, these springs will actually collapse and they'll be collapsed down to where the coils are actually touching one another. And if that happens, you want to put new springs in the unit. So usually most of the times if the unit has not overheated severely, these springs will be okay. Otherwise they'll collapse. And if that happens, and if these springs collapse, obviously the pressure and the pressure plate is going to not hold the direct clutches properly and they're going to smoke the direct clutches. So you want to make sure that these springs are all uniform and again have no signs of coil binding. Then you could reuse them. If not, you want to put new springs in the unit. So let's take them out.
So I've got that overdrive somewhat disassembled. I mean, the only things I really didn't take apart fully are the valve body assembly and the pump assembly and the accumulator overdrive piston assembly. But what I figured I'd do is just go over everything so far, how it stands, okay? Let's look at it. So I got the front cover with the reverse eyelet shaft, the main case assembly completely stripped down, except of course I left these fittings in place like this. No need to touch them, but maybe we'll take them apart and reseal them. You've got the overdrive piston and accumulator assembly. It's a two-piece piston. Notice the quad seals. These are pretty neat, interesting seals here. You got the direct clutch finger piston, the direct clutch pressure plate and springs, rear output shaft and pump assembly with the sprag, the valve body assembly with the pressure switch and the solenoid, the overdrive clutch pack and steels, obviously the oil pan and magnet. This is the complete planetary system that gives you your overdrive ratio with the angular contact bearing. And if you look here, we can see that the sun gear roller bearing is starting to come out. So that could be a potential problem. And in this pile, we have the direct clutch pack and steels. We have the direct clutch thrust washer, the direct clutch roller bearing, and all sorts of miscellaneous hardware, bolts and check balls and stuff like that. I really like disassembling those overdrive units. I haven't done one in a long time. I've probably done close to about 800 or 900 of these transmissions for General Motors when the cars were under warranty. Anyway, if you can, hit the notification button for the videos or subscribe to my channel so you'll get notifications when part 2 of this video comes out. I really appreciate that you guys have been giving me great feedback and watching my videos. It's awesome. Thanks for watching. See you in part 2.